Did you know that Chrystia Freeland used to sit on the board of trustees for the World Economic Forum while she was a cabinet minister here in Canada? Now, I don't want to make this video political and start pointing my finger at only Liberal Party members and cabinet ministers, because I'm certain if I do deep diving on all our politicians, there's a lot of shady stuff that's happening across all aisles. But in my deep dive on the World Economic Forum that I'm doing, which many of you have requested me do, I think it's important that we unpack how there's a natural conflict of interest when a minister, a cabinet minister of any G7 country, sits on the board of trustees for this non-governmental organization in the World Economic Forum that puts out research papers and policy papers that it wants G7 countries to adopt on a wide scale. I just naturally see that as a conflict, right? Like, if I were a cabinet minister in any government, and I'm sitting on a board for a company or an organization that's advocating policy change, naturally I will be influenced to advocate on their behalf at my cabinet meetings. Or alternatively, I could also tell the organization, hey, by the way, this isn't going to land in Canada, and here's why. So you may want to reframe things. Now, this is all just my opinion, and it's just my assumptions, but that's where I think a conflict of interest could occur. So, interestingly enough, Chrystia Freeland was part of the World Economic Forum's Board of Trustees since January 2019 while she was Minister of Foreign Affairs. It wasn't clear to me when her term ended, but even on Wikipedia, if you go to Wikipedia, great source, by the way, the World Economic Forum's Board of Trustees says as of 2024, the board is composed of, and Chrystia Freeland's name is still there. So I don't know, you trust Wikipedia for what it's worth, but there's a variety of actors there that are also included. So they must be getting that information from somewhere. So I'm assuming, and again, I don't know her role as board of trustee, but I imagine it's to attend meetings. It's to help us set some type of agenda moving forward for the next few fiscals or the year ahead, and to also look at the performance of what the World Economic Forum has put forward, what was adopted, what was passed by countries, and where some of the work still needs to be done. Because the World Economic Forum is a very powerful not-for-profit organization. It brings together these like really powerful business leaders, CEOs, politicians, academics to discuss these policy ideas. And I don't think that there's no place for that. I think policy ideas from business leaders is important, but it has to be from business leaders, right? It has to be from academics. It has to be from CEOs. There has to be that independent element to it. Because if it's tinged with a political, like, hey, this isn't going to fly and here's why and you should change it, suddenly it's like, okay, so are our policies that governments pursue just kind of like already predefined because the World Economic Forum's already made those calculations, if that makes sense. So I'll give you an example. In my last video, I talked about digital identity and how, since like 2016 and 2019, the World Economic Forum has really pushed for a digital ID. Even in 2023, they had this report called Reimagining Digital ID, where it argues that the digital identity systems have to give people control. Well, interestingly enough, in 2018, Canada did the Known Traveler Digital Identity pilot project with the World Economic Forum. I believe it was us and the Netherlands. We were the two pilot countries. Now, interestingly enough, again, Chrystia Freeland is foreign minister at the time. There was a lot of push for digital monetization and more trust with our data. And so the framework that the WEF put forward and Canada's policies at the time both embraced this like cross-system digital identification. And I talked about this in my previous video, but basically it's like the WEF was saying that a digital ID would allow you to interact with health, education, finance, purchasing things, tech, etc. All these spheres of your life. And I argued in my first video that I think from a convenience factor, many Canadians would be on board with that. But there are serious privacy concerns, and there are serious like rights that are challenged with a digital ID that are guaranteed in our charter. So if you haven't watched that video, definitely check it out. So we already start seeing like little hints of what the WEF is saying and what Canada is doing early in Chrystia Freeland's tenure. But here's something really interesting that I found in the WEF's annual report in 24-25. It emphasized that, quote, sustainability is the core of economic security and finance. Global finance must integrate climate risk, social, and governance factors. And this is where it gets really interesting because during this time, in 2024, Chrystia Freeland is our finance minister. And she says, made in Canada sustainable investment guidelines are absolutely necessary and, quote, mandatory climate-related financial disclosures are needed for large companies. She continues to say that in the 21st century, a competitive economy is a net zero economy. This is almost word for word the things that the WEF have advocated for. The WEF has routinely advocated for net zero economies and also has talked about climate-related financial disclosure. So if countries are investing in companies that don't have proper disclosure on their climate records, this is a concern. This is echoed by Chrystia Freeland as our finance minister during this time. Now, this is where it gets really interesting because, again, I see this conflict, right? Like you can't be minister of a G7 country and also sit on the board of an organization that's trying to establish global public policy ideas, like a global digital ID, like climate-related financial disclosures. Remember, during this time, like climate change was like really big across many of the G7 countries. But here's where it gets really interesting. And that's with the Ukraine reconstruction. Because interestingly enough, and again, I swear I've done a video on this, but it's about Ukraine and its reconstruction that, you know, Mark Carney has pushed Chrystia Freeland off to do reconstruction now for Ukraine as the head of heading that up. So again, Freeland becomes Canada's special representative on Ukraine reconstruction in 2025. Well, get this, in Davos in 2024, the World Economic Forum placed emphasis on, quote, investing in reconstruction of Ukraine as part of a global security economy agenda. Quote, revive economic growth, protect the climate and nature, invest in jobs, skills, and health. So that's in 2024. In 2025, Freeland becomes Canada's special rep for Ukraine reconstruction. And again, it's not clear if she's still on the board of trustees because as of 2024, it lists her. I assume she's no longer on the board of trustees at the World Economic Forum, but that linkage is clear. It's the pivot point now as it's clear that G7 countries are focusing on Ukrainian reconstruction. You know, up until this point, it was about supplying Ukraine, and certainly they still will, with ammunition, etc., to fight off Russia. But now it seems like there's a new phase of reconstruction. And interestingly, Chrystia Freeland is heading that up, which was also echoed by the World Economic Forum. And folks, this is exactly why I built, for the first time ever, the Clarity Method. The Clarity Method is a new digital tool that I've built, which tries to make sense of these complicated issues in a 7-step process. It's very easy to follow along. I've included like worksheets as well. But I've also been met so many times with these messy global topics, and it's really hard to understand like how to make sense of all of this from all the noise. And like so many people out there are trying to get you to believe what they think. And so it's so important that we pause, take a step back, and try to ask ourselves, what's in it for the person feeding me the information to get from me? And usually it's attention, it's, believe their side, etc., which is why I created the clarity method, a simple 7-step process where you can unpack global issues with clarity. And so it's my first digital product. I've left a link below. It's a pay what you can. There's a suggested price, but don't feel obliged to pay that price. Pay what you can. Whatever you pay will go back into me reinvesting into this channel and everything I'm doing. So if you want to see more of these videos and better things that I'm doing and bigger things and even live events, hit that like button, subscribe, and check out the clarity method below. Okay, so I just want to end this YouTube video. I just want to double down on the fact that I'm not here to like stir up controversy and make these like wild conspiracy theories about the WEF and its control over Canada, but instead to point you to real world examples where there's clearly a conflict between what the Economic Forum is doing and the impact it has on Canadian policy. In my opinion, I know that maybe I'm like thinking about this too much, but like Canadian policy that's put forward by government has to in some way be tied back to what Canadians want. It can't solely come from these international bodies that don't live in our reality. Yes, they have members, sure, but like we're Canadian. The government has to be of us, by us, for us. Like it has to, the House of Commons is named that because it's a House of Commoners. And it feels like our policies, many of them, are set by a broader international agenda without Canadian voices really at the table. So again, I want to make this about liberal and conservative because again, if I did a deep dive on all politicians in the House, I'm sure I'll find very similar or if not like extremely partisan organizations that politicians are part of. But that said, in this case, we clearly see the WEF's power on Canadian policy through Chrystia Freeland. And that should give us all pause for concern. And to be honest, I think it should be something that prime ministers should be like, this, you can't be part of these international bodies while cabinet minister. But I'd love to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you haven't already, like I said, like, subscribe, share, check out the clarity method, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care, everyone.